So this is a chart put together by sportsbrowser.net that details the most popular sports in the US. You can see American football firmly planted at the top with a pretty nasty lead. I'm talking about they finna lap the field. So common sense would have a business person see an opportunity. All these fans of the sport, all these college kids that don't make it to the NFL, I mean, half of them have already been marketed, promoted, and some come with built-in fan bases. So an alternative pro league is really a no-brainer. And so they tried and tried again. Like, stop me if you heard this before. No American football spring league has ever worked for any real length of time. And recently it's gotten even more difficult as these leagues have struggled to make it through just a single season. So when the USFL announced that they would be trying this whole spring football thing again, there was a lot of doubt. Once people found out teams wouldn't even be stationed in their respective cities, the criticism just came pouring in. And once we saw the TV product early on, I gotta be honest, that particular criticism was valid. Every team played at the same stadium in Birmingham, Alabama, and crowds only showed up to the Birmingham games. So when you watched any of the other games on TV, the fact that nobody bothered to show up would make you think that the product was bad. But that really couldn't be further from the truth. Despite the lack of crowds in the loud section of the Tractor Zone line, the USFL pressed on and actually managed to finish their 10-week inaugural season this past weekend. Yeah, they had a hiccup here or there with the whole Pizzagate thing, but ultimately they weathered the storm and finished the season. And not only that, but despite having little to no fans at the actual stadiums, the USFL managed to build and hang on to a pretty solid television fan base over these last 2.5 months. Throughout the course of the entire season, across 5 different TV stations or platforms, USFL games averaged 658,000 viewers per game, according to USFLNewsHub.com. An extremely solid number for a brand new league. Definitely something to build on. And the fact that they was able to average that many viewers while keeping operating costs at a minimum by hosting all the games in one spot, that's actually a pretty big reason why they were able to get through their initial season. At the same time, they did suffer some major inconsistency from week to week, and they actually had their lowest viewership all season in week 10. Having your lowest viewership in the final week of the season for a brand new league, at first glance, absolutely sounds like interest just tapering off. But if we just look a little bit closer, there actually may be another explanation. See, by the time they got to the final week of the season, the people who were locked in and watching all the way through realized that the playoff seeding had already been decided. So the week 10 games really didn't have any meaning. So the viewership drop off in the final week is likely just fans getting ready for the playoffs, which are this weekend, by the way. So it ain't over yet, and they still need to stick the landing, but I think the USFL has done a pretty damn good job at this point in the process. But they do need to have a good playoff showing, both product on the field and numbers wise, if they want to stick the landing and finish their entire season out strong. And there's actually a few reasons why I believe that this might be their best showing yet. Let me ask you something that seems like a random question, but I promise it's gonna tie in perfectly. Have you ever gotten into a video game like a year or two after it came out? I'm talking about after the bug fixes, all the early patches and updates, not to mention a full year of content that was originally drip fed to the day one guys. You come in and you just got all of that at your fingertips right now. That's gonna be the USFL playoff experience in a nutshell. Over the first few weeks, they were ironing out kinks in the broadcast. Teams were still trying to find chemistry, bro. They were still changing in-game rules in week 4. But now the broadcaster found a nice groove. Teams are starting to look like well-oiled machines. And that week 4 rule change we was talking about, it actually made the product better and sped up the games. These are all the reasons I believe that this weekend's product should vastly outdo anything that we was watching early on. And since it's the playoffs in an 8-team league, we're only dealing with the top 4 teams, so the best of the bunch. That should help as well. But all of that could pale in comparison to what I believe might be the biggest change for the USFL playoffs. Or should I say the change that's going to have the biggest impact on the TV viewing experience. Location. Location. Yeah, okay, I said it. Like I said earlier, to this point in the season, all the games have been played in Birmingham. We talking about 40 games in the exact same stadium. trying to attract over and over and over and over the exact same concentration of fans. And early on, more fans did show up. But when there's this thing in your backyard every single weekend and nowhere else, interest can kind of be up and down for the locals. And while there were a few extremely committed fans who would travel to Mobile to attend their team's game, let's be honest, most people not about to do that. And even if they do, we're talking about traveling to attend one weekend. You got 10 weeks to fill. But the playoffs are different. See, the playoffs are going to be held in Canton, Ohio, at the Pro Football Hall of Fame. We're talking about a brand new fan base who hasn't had live football in months. And there's actually something at stake. This is the playoffs. This is win or go home. I think they might attract a decent crowd. So the crowd plus the fact that it's the 4 best teams playing in win or go home type games should bring about a great television product. And that could culminate into the perfect storm for the USFL. What do I mean by that? The USFL could very possibly attract one of their largest television audiences of the entire season. And then all of those eyeballs are gonna get to see the absolute best version of the USFL product that they have to offer. There were a lot of times this season where the USFL had to compete directly with the NBA playoffs and NBA finals. Well, Steph and them already wrapped that up, so competition for eyeballs also won't be as steep. And if they do decide to move the 8 teams to their respective cities next year, they may actually be able to carry over this best version of the league into the regular season in 2023. And while they're not quite out of the woods yet, I mean, it is just one season. The USFL has made it further than recent spring leagues and further than most people thought they would. So if they were able to average 683,000 viewers per game this year, add a little bit of atmosphere to those games next season, and you might mess around and have something that lasts. When this league originally started out, it was thought to be so fragile that a slice of pizza almost ruined the whole thing. Before they ever kicked the ball off, they had to defend themselves in court after a lawsuit was filed by the old USFL members. And lastly, spring football is something that just has not seen sustained success, despite the numbers suggesting that it absolutely should. So plenty of leagues have tried and failed, but maybe the USFL is here to break the mold.